So now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Joy Kreeft Peyton. She is a senior fellow at the Center for Applied Linguistics and the president of the Coalition of Community-Based Heritage Language Schools. We invited Joy to give this, to begin the summit with sort of a broader perspective than the perspective we have here in higher ed and academia. Joy was a founding member of the Alliance for the Advancement of Heritage Languages, which is hosted at the Center for Applied Linguistics. And she has over 35 years of experience in languages, linguistics, and cultures in education. So really, we're hoping to her to sort of cast a broader perspective and open up the summit with that talk. And without any further comment, I'm going to turn it over to Joy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. I am very excited to be part of this conference and to share a few thoughts and then to learn from you and hear from you and everything you're doing. I'm really eager to hear about that. So I'm going to start by saying a few things about the coalition, which was founded in 2012 by a group of leaders in these community-based schools. And we actually started, as Kathy mentioned, we actually started focusing on heritage language education and heritage language development much earlier in 1990. Some of you will remember that at that time, heritage languages started emerging as an important topic, and the UCLA was holding the annual Heritage Language Conference, and we would go to that. And so we, at the Center for Applied Linguistics, in order to collaborate in that work, we started the Alliance for the Advancement of Heritage Languages. That's at the Center for Applied Linguistics. And I mention that just because there are a lot of useful resources there. There's the website. It's still available at the Center for Applied Linguistics. We used to write what we called heritage briefs, which were overviews of issues in the field. This was one of the main ones that's relevant to our talk today. What are the challenges and needs of community-based heritage language programs? And then we did a series of heritage voices, profiles of programs and profiles of languages. And I was just looking at that today and I was getting a little inspired. I was thinking, this is something we can do. We can profile more of these languages and that are being taught and spoken in the US and more of these schools. Here's one of the schools. It's a Spanish school in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And the French, probably maybe some of you know about the French Heritage Language School in New York City. I could say tons about that program, but I'm not going to. But anyway, very exciting. Here's our, so that's how we started with the Alliance for the Advancement of Heritage Languages. We focused on heritage languages in all aspects of the US life and education, including in university. And so I worked with Nellis Van Duzen Scholl for a while, thinking about university issues. But then we were going to conferences and reading articles and so on. And what we realized, this group of us, is, yeah, but what about community-based schools? Nobody's talking about them. A lot of people don't know that they exist. And let's focus on that. So we organized the coalition to connect, support, and advocate for these schools across the United States. And that's what we do now. And there's our Facebook page. You can see a lot of languages there. We have a core team of 7 people who carry out this work, and they're listed here. And we also work with the National Heritage Language Center at UCLA and American University. They're our very close partners. We also quickly decided that we could not do the work by ourselves, connecting with schools and so forth. And so we now collaborate with 97 language representatives who are working with 35 languages. And I apologize if you work with Serbian. Serbian is misspelled there, so sorry. Not all of the language, as you can see, you can quickly see, not all of the languages that are taught in the US are represented here. So if you work with any community-based schools teaching other languages and would like to become a language representative, we would love to have you. Just write to me. I'll put my email at the end of the talk. Or if you know somebody else who works with a language that's not represented here, you can see Native American languages are highly underrepresented. We have one person from Osage Nation. We have not been making good connections there. So working with the language representatives and with our team, we have so far identified and documented schools teaching 450 schools, important number in what you're going to see in a minute, teaching 39 languages. Now, you know right off the bat, there are more languages to work with. There are more languages to document. There are more schools to document. And so we would love, here's the list of languages that are documented and the number of schools for each language. So we have more schools to document, more languages to document, and we can see that right away when we look at Joshua Fishman in the 60s, identified nearly 2,000 what he called ethnic community-based schools operating in dozens of languages. And then in the 80s, he documented 6,500 schools. So we have a long way to go, but we're moving forward. We also have an annual conference, and we would love for you to participate in that with us. There's the conference webpage where we put our recordings and our resources, just like you all plan to do. So all the presentations are there, the keynote addresses, and many other presentations. And we're in the process right now of holding webinars on teaching online. And the next one coming up is on technology-infused curriculum, necessity or opportunity. I think we all know it's kind of a necessity right now, but these are our webinars. And if you would like to get news about our conference or our webinars, you can get that here at on our website. Very easy to find the place to sign up for the newsletter and very easy to sign up. But if you have a problem with it, just write to me and I'll send you the link to sign up to receive the newsletter. So now, I want to ask you if any of you are connected with a community-based school in any way, and I know your focus is university, but some of you might work with or be connected with a community-based school. If you are, could you please put the language in the chat? And I can't see the chat now, but I will look at that later. I'd love to see if anybody's working in that. So now moving beyond the coalition. As many of you know, community-based schools, or maybe you don't know, but you think about your own situations, and I think you'll see similar challenges. The challenges that community-based schools, and we're all facing in the United States. And if you think of other challenges that I don't mention, please put them in the chat. So one is a lack of societal focus on bilingualism and multilingualism. As you'll see as I talk, that's changing, but we have had and continue to have a lack of focus on that. Limited educational opportunities for many students to become bilingual or multilingual. And this includes students who speak one or more languages other than English, but have limited opportunities to become bilingual or multilingual. Engaging students from a young age, preschool and elementary school, through middle school, high school, into universities and into careers. And of course, you all are doing the work at the university, which is fabulous. Limited instructional materials that are appropriate and effective. A changing teacher and administrator team, often without credentials and often changing a lot. Some of the teachers in the schools are paid very limited amounts of money, or they're not paid at all. So this is a challenge of, particularly of community-based schools. Funding, outreach, visibility, big challenges. And then of course, transitioning to teaching online, and we made that transition, and what do we do now? So in the United States, if you disagree with me, write it in the chat. In the United States, all languages that are not English have faced and still face challenges in terms of engaging students over time into high school and college, having recognition for their value in people's lives, having students using the language, wanting to use the language, and reaching high levels of proficiency. And of course, we can talk about what that would look like, high levels of proficiency. But I don't know, can you see this? Because mine is covered up with my control. There we go. Surendra Gambhir summed this up very well one year when he said, he's focusing on Hindi, where English grows, nothing else grows. I thought that was a very interesting thought. But what we really want, what we really want is what Joshua Fishman mentioned, which is the language, whatever language we're thinking of, functions across the full spectrum of the community's life and affairs, so that all aspects of use, learning, and use of the language work in the interest of maintaining or promoting the vitality of the language. So with that in mind, how do we encourage and engage students so that they will continue their language use and learning? How do we do these things that Joshua Fishman mentions here? And I think I'm looking forward to what you all are saying, because I think that's what you're focusing on in this conference. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the COD model. I don't know if you've heard of this before: capacity, opportunity, and desire. And this was developed initially by Francois Grin and Joe Lobianco. And they were thinking about the vitality of a language in a country. And they were documenting what is the level of that vitality, starting with Irish, and then moving on to other languages. But then Joe and I started talking about, well, these are also relevant in the lives of individuals and communities. We can think about this when we're thinking about students. And so we did a special issue of the Heritage Language Journal. You can see now, several years ago. But we talked about vitality in the United States of these different languages in terms of capacity, opportunity, and desire. And then different people wrote about their languages in the United States. And what does their language vitality look like? Chinese, German, French, Hindi, Japanese, Korean, and Native American languages. So that's a really interesting issue, but you can see here they are. Here are all three components: capacity, opportunity, and desire. So let's start thinking about capacity for a minute. We're all of us here are working on building students' capacity. That is proficiency to use the language in some way through formal and informal transmission. Formally in instructional settings, and you can see the context for informal use: homes, families, communities, wherever in the country where the language is spoken. But it's interesting to think about, what do we mean by proficiency? And I have heard people tell me recently that they've been in programs where the proficiency focus has been on vocabulary and grammatical structures. I was in a really interesting talk yesterday that Steve Krashen gave. You all probably know Steve Krashen, comprehensible input, and he's really into reading, sustained silent reading, if you remember that. Somebody in his talk was saying that she was in a program to learn her language, and the focus was on the alphabet, and that was all. So are we interested in vocabulary and grammatical structures only and learning the alphabet, or are we interested in actual use? In what ways, at what levels, for what purposes, where, with whom, and why? So capacity building, there are lots of things we could discuss about that, and I actually am sure that you all do discuss it. But Joe and Francois Grin made a very strong statement, and that is that capacity is not enough. Having a high level of proficiency will give you more opportunities to use the language. You'll be able to use it in many, many more contexts, in many, many more ways. But actually, the language will not be vital in your life unless you have the opportunity to use it in social, educational, and other settings outside of the school. Without these domains, no amount of formal instruction or informal learning will result in language vitality. And of course, I think you probably all have an example in your own lives or that of your friends and family. I never get to use it, and so I've lost it. I don't know how to use that language anymore. So we have to have both. And I said this already, but it's a great point that increased proficiency often gives us increased opportunities. But you all are thinking about this. What capacity development efforts are in place in your schools and programs, and are they resulting in increased opportunities to use the language? And what opportunities are those? Oh, so I asked that here. What are the opportunities to use the language? How extensive, rich, and complex, or limited and simple, are these opportunities? Who has access to them? Big question right now. Who has access to these opportunities? Even if they have access, who chooses to participate? In what ways? To what extent do they participate? Why? For what purposes? And with what desired outcomes? So that's the need for both capacity and opportunity. Now, have you been with students, and I know many people who have high language capacity, have many opportunities to use the language in the community, even at the university, and they're not interested. They're not interested. So a third necessary component is desire. That is identification with and investment in learning the language, because proficiency brings certain rewards. Use of the language must be nurtured, and there must be opportunities in social and economic environments. And here's an example of this that Joe said. Proficiency and opportunity do not always result in language use. There are a high number of individuals in Ireland who have high linguistic capacity in Irish, but only a small number use the language on a regular basis. And that's because they don't choose to. So why? What are the motivational factors? Well, proficiency in the language brings certain rewards. Well, what are those rewards? Use of the language serves as a component of one's identity, and we'll see more about that later. And use of language promotes association with and participation in a community of speakers, and we'll see a little bit more about that later. I really like this is a while ago that Gardner and Lambert came up with these different components of desire enhancement, of motivation. Personal, I spoke at a school once. It was a Portuguese community-based school, and one of the parents said, wow, I never thought about instrumental and integrative. I've only thought about personal. That's why we're teaching our kids the language. Connect with family, connect with community members, engage in personal activities. But there's also many instrumental reasons: economic advantages, professional opportunities, buying power, academic or workforce success, prestige because of recognition of my ability in the language. Integrative use, a sense of identity and connection, engagement with the popular culture, inspiration from celebrities. And my kids were actually inspired to learn Spanish because of celebrities, not because of me. So there, I just wanted you to have the references for Gardner and Lambert for those things that they talked about. So once again, action, not just thinking, but action is needed on all three fronts simultaneously. So I'm going to talk about some ways that people I know are engaging in action in this regard and seeking to build desire and engagement. Now, right, I'm talking about desire and engagement at this point. Oh, sorry. What are the motivations of desire in this context? With this, some questions to think about with this group of speakers, and what desire promoting concepts and activities are included in this effort that we're engaged in. So I'm really excited to hear what you all are doing in terms of desire. Well, one way to build desire is to set goals that students want to reach and to make those goals clear, all the way up to highly proficient. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to advance it. It's interesting in this diagram by Dick Brecht, you probably know him. when he was at American Councils. He has heritage language schools down in the novice area. Oh, no, then he has them up here in intermediate, advanced. I only noticed them in novice. But anyway, he has heritage language schools and programs going up through, but college and universities can get up to distinguished and advanced. But that's one way, is to set goals. Where do we want to go? Another way that you all probably know about is the state seal of biliteracy and the global seal that students can get when they graduate, a recognition of their language proficiency in addition to English. They have to pass tests to get that. And then visible recognition of that achievement. Here's something from the Bulgarian school in Seattle, recognizing these students, and just credit for proficiency. Documents like this or other ways of granting credit is very motivating to students. This is the great French Heritage Language Program in New York City, but to engage students with ambassadors who speak the language and bring the credit, bring the recognition to the students. So some other ways to build desire and engagement. I'll show you a few, and I'll bet you all have more, which you can put in the chat, or you'll probably be sharing it later. Engaging curriculum, instruction, and materials, not an easy thing. Opportunities to travel to places where the language is used, which of course has become less easy now. Opportunities to serve in the community using the language in ways that the student feels proficient and effective and respected. Interactions with leaders who use the language in their lives and work. How do they use it? Why is it important? Ashok Ojha, who works with Hindi, I participated in an online session that he had where he brought high school students in, and they talked with professionals in all different areas of life about how they used Hindi and why it was important to them. And knowledge that language proficiency can increase job opportunities. So for example, here's an article, bilingual employees can learn more than monolingual, those who speak only one language. Just saying, this is what learning more than one language works, that it will do for you. So once again, if you probably have many, many more ways that you engage students, and I'd love to hear about them or later, or you can put them in the chat. So what I thought would be interesting is to ask leaders in these community-based schools, because they've devoted their lives to teaching and promoting this language, why do you care about this language? What do you do with it? And what would you like to do? So I'm just going to give you some answers from community-based leaders. And this is Arabic, and we have no time. We don't have time right now to read all of this, although it's very interesting to read. But she talks about how the community centers its mission on the roots and treasures multilingualism for both heritage and non-heritage speakers, and wants to help children become more rooted and capable adults. Angela Hasheva, Bulgarian. Whoops. Yeah, sorry. There we go. Sorry. Helps me to cope with the events in my life and also to make a positive impact on others, which many of these people want to. Binds people together. We talked before about the importance of identity and community. We'll see a lot of that here. French, the French Heritage Language Program. It allows me to be who I am. We've got identity again. It connects me with the vast and diverse French-speaking world. Connection. It's the way to help people be connected to their roots and to their identity. Lithuanian. I work in international philanthropy, the Kazikas Family Foundation, which gives grants to Lithuanian language efforts. And I'm responsible for the survival of the Lithuanian language, and she's talking about in her family. Native American languages. Our language is our sovereignty. Our language is who we are as a people. Once again, we see the power of identity. Persian. I share my thoughts, my literature, art, books, foods with communities in Persian. I embrace diversity by coping with differences. Spanish. I think I mentioned Maria Carrera before, but you'll see her again. You probably know Maria Carrera, many of you. My earliest memories of love, wonder, and sheer delight were in the unmistakable rhythm of Cuban Spanish. And then she talks about the challenge of not being understood and feeling otherness, and how do we deal with that in using our language. Tamil, right? Tamil, right. Yeah. Sorry, here we go. I derive immense pleasure cherishing Tamil literature that has a very long and rich tradition. And he wants to write books for Tamil audiences. I have a few projects to translate literary books from Tamil to English and books in English to Tamil. And I just want to mention again that this talk that Steve Krashen gave yesterday was focused on books for children, because he's saying stories are so important. I would love to hear if you guys agree with that. Stories are just so important, and we need engaging books for children, for teenagers, for adults, and there aren't very many. If you all are interested in his talk, I will send Nick or Kathy the recording. Another one, Turkish. I'm supporting Turkish schools. They're struggling pedagogically and economically, which is true. And I like to produce more teaching materials, more instructional strategies. And this was very interesting. When you all sent out the announcement about this conference, a woman wrote to me and she said, I think you'd really like to learn about this, Africanists. And in this really fabulous video, these people talk about why these different African languages are important to them. It's really fascinating. And I don't think you can hear it, but it starts with beautiful music. So we have I think we've come a long way, I would say. I'd love to know what you think. And we'll continue to move forward together, which is what you all are doing in this conference. But here are just a few examples of where I think we're making progress. So, book by Fabrice Chameau, who's with the French Heritage Language Program, he talks about the shift away from what he calls a foreign language deficit, to changes that we need to occur for us to move forward together. And then Steve Levine talks about claims that we're in a bilingual century now, and how are we going to build that bilingual century. And then there's a conversation online with Fabrice and Steve, where they talk about how we can give kids many experiences, how businesses can gain an edge globally by having bilingual speakers, how can lifelong learners become more than tourists, and finally have the finally honed brain power. The Sydney Institute of Community Language Education just had a conference recently and in Australia, and it was really well done. And you can watch the program here. Both Joe Lobianco, who I've been talking about, and Maria Carrera are keynote speakers. So that is worth watching. And there's Maria Carrera again. She's the keynote speaker at an upcoming conference, the University of Washington Heritage Language Symposium. It'd be interesting to see. The timing is similar to yours, and it'd be interesting to see what they're doing February 12th, and you can register at the link that I gave. And of course, you can participate in our conference. Just one more thing I want to say, that this effort, this focus on community-based heritage language schools, we are now making international connections, and we just recently developed international guidelines for professional practices in community-based heritage language schools, and it's available online, and you might want to take a look at that. I think you might find those interesting as you're thinking about your programs. So we have more to do. I believe that's the focus of this conference, and I look forward to learning what you all are doing and interacting about that. So thank you very much for letting me talk. I hope it was helpful.